Starting. Okay. Yes. So I was saying that we may consider moving this to a more appropriate time, so it can, fit all the schedule of everyone. Because I feel that this is getting a little bit too JSON API lately.
Yeah.
And I would be delighted to have more people come and put some light from the perspective of GraphQL. I actually don't know who are the people involved besides Sebastian. So that would be nice if someone else could come. And also from core development. Many things that are happening today in core, and I'm pretty sure that Daniel can talk to that, are related to things that we are doing. So we could leverage a lot of stuff, and I'm interested in particular about testing, because writing tests is so tedious. It gets fun sometimes, but not always. So things like that could be reusable. Maybe also try to get some time from Ted Bowman. He's been working in a lot of the topics that would be kind of in this middle land, like doing the configuration entity support, etc. Do you have anything in mind, Daniel, that could be like from your point of view critical that the two projects, well, a core and this project, the JSON API project, would share, and it could be good to communicate better?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm wondering. I mean, I don't know. Maybe like the way how you configure them could be somehow shared, so it could be made easier for people to have some kind of transition path from using REST modules to using JSON API or GraphQL. I'm not sure whether it's possible, but I could imagine something like that. Make it easier to switch to something better.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was done.
Okay, so I don't know if you had the opportunity to check. I think it was last week's video. Probably not, because they get super boring. But one of the things that we were talking about was that with the Traverse library that that we want to implement in collaboration with Sebastian and the GraphQL community, we would be able to explore the schema. In our case, it would be the bundles, and from that schema, we would have like a configuration object that then we could use to configure a resource. So the idea would be that the Traverse library would be able to do things like, I'm pretty sure that Sebastian would describe this as a node visitor, like that says this field underscore description becomes description, or this body dot value becomes body, or this kind of stuff could live in that schema discovery that this graph library would generate. So in this sense, I think that this is very reusable for REST core. So that configuration, so additional configuration, sorry, could live on top of that. And in my head, one of the things that you could do is, once you have this schema, you can override it or complement it with manually generated configuration, or site builder could go and check, okay, I want these and these fields be totally hidden from the API, or this kind of interactions. I haven't thought too much about the interactions, but yeah, they could be useful. So that's one thing that I think that could be leveraged in both projects and eventually in core, because the no code, no configuration approach, it can only take you so far, right? Right now
Oh
it's
yeah.
just tackle
I,
it and start using.
yeah, I think that would already like provide a lot of values to users, right? Even like existing users could profit from it by just not having to deal with zero and value all the time.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that would be a big win. Right now, the JSON API project is dealing with this at the normalizer layer doing serialization. We are just inspecting. If cardinality is 1, then bye-bye array. So this kind of stuff. Apart from that, I think that JSON API has gotten some kind of support because we are taking an approach of rapid or agile development. Basically, we are just making it work, writing some tests, and then moving on, assuming that there are bugs, multiple bugs, but we don't have to make it stable. It's not like core. You cannot ship anything that you know that is not stable into core, right? So given that we can move a little bit faster, we've gotten support for getting config entities and delete and update. And this is new for this week's update. We have full support on both content and config entities. So one of the things that I would like to know, is there any place where I can track the let me think about how can I ask this. So is there any place where I can find the development of the support of configuration entities in REST core that could help me piggyback some of the code that gets derived in that issue, and for me to say, hey, this is a starting point of what I have been doing, and you can use this, or okay, so there are
Yeah, there's like a meta issue for supporting config entities in core. But yeah, I mean, we have the problem in core that we need, for example, we have to validate the configuration which comes in order to ensure that actually there's something right in there. And the problem is that configuration entities don't have any kind of validation at the moment, besides schema validation. So yeah, in core we cannot. We need basically the entire validation machinery of entities for configuration entities as well. And yeah, that's a hell of a lot of effort. Yeah, this is why I really think like something like config can and should iterate much faster.
right, right. Yeah, basically the right operations are what I found this week is that it's mostly the same, but you don't have the field access controls and you don't have validations.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure how problematic actually field access is for config entities. I mean, there's no user content in there, right? So you cannot really expose any critical information.
I don't
I
know
guess.
if it would even make sense, or but yeah, yeah, those were the differences that I was saying. Okay, I will keep an eye on, or try to keep an eye on that issue, given the availability. I also, so on the agenda is the status of the GraphQL project. I don't know anything about what happened during this week in GraphQL, but I'm assuming that the most amazing and awesome things happened, because you know.
It's finished.
So, yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of effort into mutators that needs to happen. The thing is that my understanding is that Sebastian wants to wait to have this traverse library in order to not to redo some work in the future. Just stop, do that, refactor, and then move on to the mutators. But that's me kind of half guessing, half remembering a conversation. So I don't want to speak for that. So for what JSON API, the status is right now is we have terrible error handling. Right now it's just it blows in your face or it doesn't, and it blows in your face in non-meaningful ways, or it kind of gives you an error message. But other than that, it's it needs to be worked on. So that could be a good focus for this next week, since we have almost full support for or almost full support for basic operations inside of get, patch, and delete. And that goes for individual entities and relationships, which is also interesting to be able to, make connections or remove a connection between two entities using the relationship resource of an entity. So there is that. Also, a good focus for this week, I think, could be having some kind of alternative ID loading. And I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but it kind of feels that we're not playing nice by not using the UUIDs as the primary ID. Instead, we are using the uniqueness of entity type plus ID to load entities. I don't know. Maybe this conversation just needs to happen and not be a focus right now. But yeah, UUIDs and HTTP APIs. They kind of, it seems that they should go hand in hand. I don't know what you guys think.
Hey guys, took me a while to figure out how to get in. Thanks, Gabe.
Yep.
The question. So you were asking about whether we should basically be exposing UUIDs instead of node IDs by default as the identity for all, as like the default settings. Did I understand that right?
Yeah. Ideally, we could, configure this to let whoever use a unique value, and if not unique, hey, you configure this. But right now, we don't have a way to configure resources. So.
Okay. Yeah, my example code lets you pick what's going to be the ID. It lets you shoot yourself in the foot too and do things that would be silly that aren't really unique, but it does. There is examples of that in there. Both the ID and the type, actually, because you can imagine worlds where people want to map something from their content type to being the JSON API type or being the JSON API ID. So I had a version that tries to let you map that all arbitrarily. I'm not sure if that's really good. It might be good as a low-level thing that we don't expose most of the time unless somebody has to reach in and fix it. It seems like like I wouldn't want every user of this thing to have to go do that before they get a useful thing, and people will have strong opinions. So it is hard to get everybody together on some kind of good default, but that's where the discussion of the defaults is a very important one. That's why I was interested in trying to make sure I understood what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what are the use cases of actually requiring an ID? Is there something like entity reference fields, for example? Do entity reference fields inherit? Do they actually need an entity ID, or could they also work with a UUID? For
Right.
example,
Yeah, I mean, for speaking for JSON API spec, it doesn't really matter what the form of the ID is. It could be a UUID or an integer, or just one integer. Those are the same as far as the protocol is concerned. They're mostly, so it mostly becomes a question of aesthetics, right? People will complain about, oh, I want URLs that have nice short IDs, or I want UUIDs so that I can pick them on the client. That's really the kind of choice. Or I've run on some distributed infrastructure, so I need to pick UUIDs from a space that will never collide without strong coordination.
Yeah. Related to that, one of the discussions that I faced in the past, and this goes back to the JSON API motto that says JSON API paints your bike shit for you.
Right.
One of the discussions that I had is IDs or UUIDs. And so what I ended up doing is I wrote a JSON API extension that creates a different parameter that says, that lets you specify something other. So this is my default ID field. So if you say that, you can toggle on and off ID, UUID, or any other unique field for that specific resource. But yeah, a good default is
for sure.
Yeah,
and so exactly, and so specifically, since we're talking about how you implement JSON API in a Drupal world, I think it's all about trying to mesh as naturally as you can with Drupal as people already understand it and the way they conceptualize it. And so, node IDs looked like a pretty strong thing to me as it was starting to, basically that they're already the canonical URLs that Drupal uses, but even though that has its own problems. But so I had been assuming all along that was the clearest thing, but I was guessing based on what I was reading in the code. So I think this is a decision where I would just kind of defer to people who know more about the way the community thinks about their data in Drupal and node IDs and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I know that like historically the NID has been the canonical ID for a resource, but I'm trying to think about what we lose by using either one, and what we gain, and it seems to me like UUID probably provides an extra benefit without like losing anything that we get with an NID. And just in work that I have coming up in the real world, we're trying to do some kind of persistent stuff, and it would be very nice to be able to do client-side generated IDs, and we get that with UUID, but we don't get that with NIDs.
Right.
So it's not, I think, what people are used to, because UUIDs, this is the first major Drupal release where they've been there in core.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
So one other argument that could be made for UUIDs is that usually allowing someone to guess where your content is may not be the best idea, especially if you don't have airtight security and access configuration. So someone going to /node 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sequentially. So with UUIDs, you don't have sequential IDs, and that is much harder to guess where the content is at.
That's a good point, and it avoids an unintentional information leak about the order things happened in. So I could understand that too as an argument. So that all sounds like good reasons to make it the default be UUIDs. That'd be cool.
Daniel, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I personally think, given that you write some custom JavaScript, for example, anyway, to deal with the content coming from JSON API, for example, I think using either UUID or ID is probably equally complex. So I would actually say, yeah, promote the good practices, which is probably using UUIDs. Yeah, we actually have an issue in core to allow loading, like if you go to node/123, rather like allow to pass in a UUID as well to load there.
Nice.
So that, it is really related with the topic of being able to deploy content, right? Because on content deployment, you also don't want to deal with like IDs, but rather UUIDs.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
I think, I mean, making it maybe possible because there might be use cases for IDs.
Now that I hear all this, I'm very convinced UUIDs sound right. And one of the first things I just said as an objection was that people like to say like, oh, aesthetically, I don't like these long URLs. But I myself have actually usually responded to those people with the opposite argument, which is that JSON API is designed to be easy to make tooling around and like a clear enough spec that's easy to implement. And aesthetics for a human being reading the API are kind of beside the point. Like, you're supposed to be able to debug it, which is very important. So it's not like just pure binary protocol, right? But it's the aesthetics of do I have a pretty URL or not pretty URL are actually totally beside the point of the goals of JSON API, which is to make something that is really good to build tooling around, and then end users don't have to think about it. So all of that is basically removes the only objection I could think of for not using UUIDs.
Yeah, and even with that, they can just set a filter for the NID or for the entity ID, and just have a list of one result.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
that's their pretty URL. Okay, so nothing to be done because that ticket is already in. I just put that ticket in and assumed that we could change it if the discussion went into another direction. So typically we make these meetings half an hour.
Because I'm sorry I came in a little late and have to go right at the limit today, but I'm happy to follow up with anybody afterward.
I actually have a hard stop in 3 minutes. So if you guys have any parting thoughts on what do you think the focus should be from the core collaboration perspective and for the project itself, now it's a good time.
Honestly, I'd like to know just what you think are any like major blockers or things that we have to get done for JSON API to be like really ready to show people, you know.
Well, I think that,
sorry, go ahead.
I think that having decent error handling that matches the specs is.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's why we're interrupting each other.
Oh, exactly. So that's internet thought. Also, we probably need some kind of pagination because this works in our dev machines, but you know it blows up everyone else's server. We may need to discuss a little bit of what kind of pagination we deliver by default. I kind of like the offset and page-based pagination, but maybe cursor pagination has its merits for some cases. I don't know if we want to just provide the extensibility tissue so someone can implement the cursor pagination in a custom module.
So one thing I'll say about pagination design is that because we're designing pagination for an API and not, it's different than pagination for just like user web-facing URLs. In that case, it's often not it's not terrible if somebody's paginating through the data and they miss something because it changed during page loads. It's tolerable more there. But if you're using this for data, particularly if you're going to try synchronizing stuff, getting a reliable window of data despite concurrent changes becomes really important. So that drives me toward something more cursor-like.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only problem with that is with custom sorting, which makes cursor pagination impossible. If you want to do cursor pagination with, I don't know, sorting by the related season number for this particular show list or whatever.
Okay. I don't know enough about the problem you're stating to say whether it's impossible. I know that some of the implementations I've seen treat the sort order as part of the cursor value, so that it's basically like start after UUID 123 sorting by date created. All right. But anyway, right. I know you have to go.
Yeah.
I have to go too.
Yes. Well, anyways, I think that pagination and sorting, which is not there yet, but but pretty close, are also blockers to start showing this to people.
Yeah, errors and pagination would be the two things I was going to say. Sorting is good too. I kind of listed it as slightly lower down, but it is important. It is implemented in my spike, an example of sorting. So, but yeah, I agree with the priorities. Okay, thanks guys. I'm going to have to drop off.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me
I
too.
will endeavor to be on the
Bye.
next one as well. Thanks. Bye.
It's a pleasure, friends. Let's talk next week. Bye.
Yeah, definitely.